Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined as always by my good buddies Richard
Hello.
and Michael.
Howdy.
Jeff, you had to think
Hey,
about the other person's name, didn't you?
yeah, who is it guy? I don't
I
know.
became the drummer.
Yeah.
John Paul George and the drummer.
the drummer. Pete Best, Pete Worst. The
Ooh.
topic, maybe we've hinted at it, is the Mount Rushmore of names or characters in Beatles songs. Michael, you came up with it. Explain it.
That was I was, this is one of those usual, I was listening to a Beatles song or album or something. And then I think I might've been doing that thing every once in a while. I'll like put on an entire artist's like uh, discography, like in order. I'll listen to, like the first Modest Mouse album, kind of listen to them all the way through. And I think I was doing it with the Beatles for some reason. And, they start singing these songs. They're all about, she loves you and I love her and the boy is, and all these people, that's all about love and very silly stuff. And then you get around to Rubber Soul and things kind of blossom in terms of songwriting, in terms of what they're referring to and what they're singing about. And they, John and Paul specifically, start like introducing like people. They start singing about people, real people, or refer to people or things or characters as an expression of themselves, as an expression of the world around them that is more than, they've developed as a band, and they're no longer just the four lads in suits and singing I Want to Hold Your Hand. It becomes a much more rich kind of panoply of characters. I mean, and certainly by the time you're looking at the cover of Sgt. Pepper, that's all it feels like they're singing about, is this explosion of like the world in general has turned into this big pop culture thing of and characters and whatever. And I think that the people and the characters within the Beatles cinematic universe at this point has a life unto its own, of who is referenced, what is referenced, a real person, someone they wrote about, something they're referring to from the past or what's happening. And I think that's where kind of their I don't know, their legacy or their whatever is really cemented within this world of, we're not just singing these lovely pop songs about going dancing and kissing, and it's like, oh, suddenly it's all psychedelic and whatever, and it's, who are these people? So that's where it came from. So I'd like to hear.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, that is a fun journey.
I mean, they're weird. They're like they there's a reason why people always refer to go back to like, oh yeah, well, they were the best. Well, they started doing a lot of this. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that idea. Like, hey, John, who are you talking to? Oh, some fella named Bobby Dylan. What does he do? Oh, he talks about real things. You think we should do that? Could do.
Yeah, I love could do.
Okay, well, cool. Let's get started. Richard, what is your first choice?
All right, so I went all four real people for my four choices. I know that wasn't, the parameters were theoretically a little bit larger, but I think it was more interesting to try and talk about situations, whereas Michael said the Beatles started talking about real life people and kind of what those people meant in the context of these songs. There are quite a few examples of this. I narrowed it down to four that I thought were the most interesting, so we can talk about ones that got left off, or maybe Michael will pick up on some of them. Yeah. First one is Sir Walter Raleigh.
Oh, fun.
Who is name checked in the song I'm So Tired. Where very specifically John Lennon is talking about smoking a cigarette and then curses out Sir Walter Raleigh, specifically calling him a git, which I think is in a very serious and downbeat song, is one of the funniest lines of any Beatles song that exists. Calling Sir Walter Raleigh a git is just it's prime Britishness, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, why are you Sir Walter Raleigh? Like, you hear him the words, and you're like, wait a second, what is? Oh, I get it. So essentially, he's basically cursing out Sir Walter Raleigh for popularizing the rolled tobacco, turning it into a cigarette that he is now smoking his God knows how many of them of the night that he's had because he can't sleep. And you know, I think it's a prime example of John Lennon, in this song that is so raw and emotional, kind of finding a way to inject some humor into it and bring in this person that you would absolutely not think would be part of this song, and somehow find a way to bring him into the song and have it all make sense in the context. So that's why I went with Sir Walter Raleigh for my first choice.
Oh, that's fun. I love that. Like a year later, it'd be "Curse Sir Walter Cocaine." Like,
Right. Sir Walter Heroin, yes.
take that guy who made cigarettes that I'm addicted to. Okay, John. I love it. I love it. Yeah, that was always a skipper on that. That was always a song that I'd kind of it had a bluesy kind of vibe to it. I was always uh
Rock and roll
look.
man.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Oh, I put that in the wrong box. Michael, what's your first?
My first song is the song "Nowhere Man" from the album
Fun.
Rubber Soul. This is, I think, while I was listening to this, kind of going through the discography of everything, I think this is the one that was one of the first ones that they kind of start referring to like this character. And certainly John Lennon wrote the song and did the vocals on it. And he kind of sings about this kind of abstract guy, this guy that's out there, that's drifting along, that doesn't have any place to go, that is um, out in the world. And maybe that is a bit kind of a harkens back to Bob Dylan and things, but ultimately it feels like, and it seems like, he was referring to himself as this person that was like adrift within the world, not knowing who he was at this point in his life. They've had this huge success, but then, within a year or so, the Beatles get, find Jesus, so to speak, and totally change in what they are in terms of experimenting with drugs and psychedelic stuff, and finding themselves with the in India. And I think this is one of those songs that is like, it kind of bridges the gap between those two periods, where he's singing about someone else, this fictional character, but he's actually singing about himself. And it's just one of those uh, uh, great songs. I mean, it starts out so slowly and droning, and then kind of picks up into what it turns into. But yeah, that's my first one, where of course, they're singing about someone else, and they're singing about themselves. So
Yeah. I think that even might be a direct result of a conversation with Dylan, who responds to all their kind of Moon June, lovey-dovey kind of lyrics, and says, "Hey, that's such a big deal, but these songs suck, man." And which is so funny. To think, like you said, like these guys were trapped in the most gilded cage anybody could ever be trapped in. They had the most unprecedented fame, but they had zero time to do anything close to having a life. And like, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And to look in the mirror and go, "You suck, dude. You're a loser."
Jeff, I'd like to make a quick aside about Bob Dylan. We talked about him recently on an episode, maybe 3-4 episodes back, about like just people I don't get, or music I have no interest in, or whatever. And I followed up and listened to like look at that guy, and had listened to one of the 500 songs in rock and roll, one of the more recent ones.
Oh yeah.
Where they talked about what, on the Watchtower? Is that the song? Is that the name of the song?
On the Watchtower,
The Watchtower. And they were talking about how he would like intentionally sing badly in order to and write terrible songs so he could like divest himself from being this person that people turn to.
Adulating. Oh,
Yeah, that
wow.
they're just that they turn to as like the spokesman for their generation. He started intentionally like writing like songs that people really don't like, so they would like stop doing that. A lot more respect for him after that. Just what, what an incredible man to be like. You want me to be the leader? How about this?
It
Now you
Yeah.
hate me?
does explain most of his 70s output.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Mhm.
Anyway, back to the
Cool.
Beatles.
Richard, what's your second?
Second one, it's a 2-for-1, but they're both mentioned in back to back in the same song, so I think that we can allow it. Mr. Wilson and Mr. Heath
Oh, yeah.
from the song Taxman. George Harrison composition. His first, I would say, major composition for the Beatles. He had written a few songs here and there before then,
Mhm.
but this is the first one that really kind of was a breakout song for him in terms of, I mean, it led Revolver was the first song off the album,
Mhm.
and really kind of like announced that, wait a second, there's a third songwriter who may be
Yeah.
just as good as the other two. This is going to get messy. Um, but this whole and you mentioned, Michael, about how Nowhere Man kind of comes from them in this period of transition and change and sort of realizing the position that they're in and how much things have changed. What hasn't changed for them is the fact that they're still broke right around the time of 64 or 65, 66 when these albums are coming out. They had a independent uh, review of their finances that basically told them two of you are almost bankrupt and the other two are close. And a big reason for that was because the new Labor government, led by Harold Wilson, had instituted a 95% tax on the wealthiest whatever percent of Britons, which the four Beatles at that point went into. So basically, in the lyrics, the one for you, 19 for me, is
Mhm.
essentially talking about the fact that for every 5% of wages they got to keep, 95% went back to the government,
That's wild.
which I'm all for taxing the rich. 95%
Yeah.
seems a little excessive to me, even as a dyed in the wool Larry liberal over here.
Yeah, well, much.
Yeah.
95% seems a little bit much. So so George Harrison writes this song, and it really is the first time that the Beatles, as far as I know, and I thought about this and I couldn't think of any other time, where they really get political.
Mm.
You know, this is the first time where where there's a song that's talking about things that are happening in politics, things that are happening in the real world, and they're naming
Mhm.
names. Kind of the background lyrics of Mr. Wilson, and then Mr. Heath, who is
Mhm.
Edmund Heath, who is the leader of the Tory party at the time. So it kind of, by doing that, it covers all their bases and basically says, doesn't matter if you're a Labor or you're a Tory, you're 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 ruining financial lives, specifically ours, the Beatles.
There you go. Still coming right back home.
Yeah, and
I
so I
remember
think
before.
it's a really important song just in the Beatles canon, just sort of,
Yeah.
kind of in this transition from, like you said, writing the "She Loves You," yeah, 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 to writing about real things that are happening in the world.
Yeah. I think had you not known the extent of the tax, like if the Beatles would have more wealth if they had stayed um, pipe fitters or whatever they were destined to be had they not become
Right.
pop stars. They would have had more income because they were being taxed at this disproportionate rate. Um, and so I remember when George singing "Within You, Without You," all this transcendental meditation stuff about the the trappings of our commercial world are all bullshit. I remember hearing that and going, "What the fuck? Are you greedy? Are you a greedy bastard? You were just singing about somebody taking your money away." But I didn't know it was like
Right.
95%.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And it is a dichotomy, the fact that George Harrison did become this really rich, pop star. And of course, the good news is that the Beatles' finances were totally fine after this. There were no headaches with their finances later on in the band, and it had nothing to do with their breakup. So that's all good.
Yeah. This I popped in the picture of Harold Wilson, the Mr. Wilson in the song, because there was a story a few years ago that he had an affair, and now they realized he had 2 affairs. So here was this guy who was taxing everybody while he was committing hanky-panky with his secretary or something.
Apparently, he
the
was
whole time.
taxing everybody, is what you're saying.
He's
the old poll tax, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Hello.
poll tax. Yay. Yay. That is an interesting thing. The idea that this like John Lennon can sing about money, that's what I want. And then you know, Harrison George
Yeah,
Harrison
it's
sings
funny
the
that
same.
it's George is the one who comes right out and says, quit taking all of our money. The one who is, living in the spiritual world guy is the one who comes out and says, I'm being ripped off. Stop it. I need my money.
And I think not long after, or when I think after Brian Epstein passes, they all start to realize that they had signed a ridiculous contract with Decca or whatever, that they were getting a penny per record, whereas the Stones were getting 5 pennies or something like that. It was just something insane. That everybody else who had another contract was getting more money. So they were starting off with less than the other guys. So yeah. All right, Michael, what's your second one?
My second choice is Jude from the song Hey Jude.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Another song that is a Paul McCartney joint where Paul is singing basically to Julian Lennon about it's a love song to try to cheer up this kid who is John's son, who's been having a hard time. I believe is because of the breakup between John and why can't I think of her name? Julia. Cynthia.
That's right. There we go.
Yeah. We got there. All of the Beatles heads were instantly sending us little messages. How dare you not remember someone's name? But Julian Lennon is like this. He's a very interesting character just in his own right. He's, obviously he's John Lennon's first child and often kind of like cast aside in a way for Sean a little bit. And even though he looks so strikingly like him, which is wild if you ever look at Julian Lennon, just splitting image. But anyway, the song is about it's this kind of long 7+ minute song about trying to tell the boy that everything's going to be okay, that you got to hang in there, that people love you. And I really don't know. The one thing I don't know about the song is what John Lennon thought about it. I don't remember the conversations or like the history of what his feelings were about, his friend, his bandmate singing a "Hey, everything's going to be okay" song to his son. Did he care for that? Did it affect him in any way? I don't know. I got to kind of read up on that a little bit, but I think it's one of those things where it's a lovely song, but has so much more meaning because of who it's about. And I think it's so effective because of that. But that's like adding all like this extra kind of like metadata to it. Like it's a great song in and of its own, and they're referring to a person. But if you do know that it's John's son, it adds just all this extra layer of texture to it and history to it. And I think that's where these songs become really interesting, is because they're not just about a made up person, a fictional character. Most of them seem to have like these kind of what's the word, like hooks or something into the real world, into a real person, but they become a Beatles character because of it, because it changed a few letters around or changed a few syllables around, and suddenly they're their own person and not this person in the real world.
I got a little bit of insight, I think, about what John thought about it.
Mm.
If I remember correctly.
Did he break up the Beatles because of it?
Yeah, I was so pissed off by it. I was like, "Fuck you guys, I'm out of here."
Hmm.
No, if I remember correctly, John actually thought that the song was secretly about him and not about Julian, and that it was Paul's way to tell him it was okay to leave the band.
Oh, classic.
The whole idea
Of course, he turned it into himself.
turned it into something about himself.
Huh.
The whole idea of you found her, now go and get her, was basically, he thought, was Paul's way of saying, now that you've got Yoko, it's okay to pursue whatever you want to do with Yoko, even if that means professionally doing something different than the Beatles. Take that for what you will.
Yeah. I think the Beatles, other than John, were actually sympathetic to Cynthia. In that History of 500 Songs, they said Paul actually went to talk to Cynthia and said, "I'm sorry, you should be treated better than this." So, and Cynthia was actually known for, at parties and things like that, she would walk in and just kind of play games where she would go hide somewhere and wait for John to find her, and he never even began to try to find her. There's a
Right.
story of Petula Clark or somebody finding Cynthia waiting in a closet and saying, "Get out of there," and then chastising John for being such an asshole to her. So,
Was this story? Was this on one of the episodes that we recorded of like the Beatles being shitty?
yeah, that would be a good episode.
I think
Another thing
we
too
do that
is
one.
like,
Did
We
we
do that. Yeah, we did the worst things
I-
about the Beatles.
yeah. Well, one of the things too is like John's father horribly neglected him. Like, why would you not? Why would you not? You just know you're repeating. I think he was aware that he was repeating that behavior. Like, yeah. Okay, Rich. Oh, so we're at a halftime, and thanks so much for being a Mount Rushmore space cadet. We appreciate you joining our cool kids club. Da, 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 da! And please share the podcast with everybody you know, and we appreciate that. And if you have a suggestion for a topic, please send that to one of our social handles: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I think they've all changed since the last time we recorded. So please do that. We would love to maybe put your topic right here on the air. So that would be super cool. And then,
Two things.
sir, yes, sir.
One, make sure that if there's that little subscribe or like button wherever you're
Oh
listening to
yeah,
this, or if you're on YouTube watching this and you want to make sure you get access to all our stuff as soon as it comes out, click on that. That helps a lot. That's a big deal for us. Also, bum, 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 we just passed 25,000 total downloads of the podcast.
Why?
So 25,000 times one of you knuckleheads has said, "Yes, I would like to listen to this." So that means a lot. Thank you guys.
Wow.
that's
We appreciate it.
kick-ass.
We appreciate our listeners. You're the reason that we do this, other than our massive egos. And we love you. Keep listening.
Agreed. That's cool. Okay, kids. Now it's going to be. I guess it's Richard the Third.
No.
That's right. And Richard III was never mentioned in a Beatles song,
I don't think so.
unfortunately. They're
Did they
only
did
in
they
a
ever-
Supergrass song.
Did he ever sing about Shakespeare? Did the Beatles ever sing about Shakespeare and make any references to? the
Well, I
bard?
mean, the Fool on the Hill is essentially King Lear.
Hmm. Okay.
That's who that's about, even though it's not explicitly said, but that's pretty much who it's about.
The
My
Beatles
third
did
choice.
perform Shakespeare. They did perform Shakespeare in some of their holiday records to fans
Messages and things.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go. See? Third choice is Chairman Mao. Mao
Oh,
Zedong from the song Revolution, where John Lennon bringing in a real life person when he is talking about it, if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you ain't gonna make it with anyone anyhow. And again, kind of in this song talking about it's I guess for me the song is talking about sort of the nature of revolution and what that generation is trying to accomplish. And John Lennon is drawing a definitive line in the sand here, kind of like he does later in the song, where he talks about if you're carrying pictures of people who the minds that hate, All I can tell you is, brother, you have to wait. Part of this is about the fact that at the time they were running a business, Apple Corps, that was losing money hand over fist because they were giving money to people who had crazy ideas, wanted to invent something, had some sort of charity that they needed money for, and they were willing to bleed their coffers, so to speak, to assist these people.
Look at
But
this.
John Lennon,
They should have just let the tax man take all of it. They didn't. What a waste of. They wasted
cut
all
out
their money.
cut
They
out the
should,
middleman. They
yeah,
were
they
cutting
should
out
have
the
just,
middleman, Michael.
should have just gone towards the poor.
Exactly. So,
Bastards.
but I think, by talking about, if you're carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, it kind of draws this line in the sand that's basically saying, look, even though we're giving money to anybody for any reason through Apple Corps, look, if you're celebrating Chairman Mao and saying this is a revolution, that's not something I can get behind. We're trying to talk about a peaceful revolution and a revolution that encourages ideas, and that's not what this is all about. So again, kind of an interesting bringing in a real life, not historical at the time uh, figure, but someone who was actually around at the time and active and doing things to kind of make this larger point about what revolution should be about.
That's a fun pull. Do you
Sorry,
feel like
I was.
There
Sorry,
he is.
there he
Big
is. There.
old photo
There it
of him.
yeah.
Sorry, I was
The
for a second.
what's fun is that also the style of that song. Why is that not refreshing? The style of that song also, not like back in the USSR necessarily, but it has a fun like throwback kind of vibe to it. There's a
Well, you
uh,
got the two versions of it too.
oh, is there, or like the single?
Yeah, because the album version is the acoustic version. That's
Oh,
that's like a lot slower, and it's got all the shooby doo
mhm.
wops in the background.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you've got the single version, which is the one that people probably know, like the one that Nike used back in the
Oh, yeah.
80s for their commercials. Um,
That's how
and
the
that's the
Beatles. That's how
electric
the
one.
Beatles really made all their money. Is they just recorded the same song twice and then got people to double dip. These people are. These people aren't scoundrels.
Yeah.
Taylor's version. That's where Taylor got it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying tennis shoe commercials. It's like, John, someday these gonna come. We're gonna be worth a lot of money for what? So
What's a
sneaky.
tennis shoe?
A trainer. Winfield.
My third choice is Eleanor Rigby from the song Eleanor
Oh,
Rigby.
fun.
This is one of Paul McCartney's songs that I think has it's also kind of sad, a little sweet, singing about the kind of the past lives of like these kind of
Mhm.
beaten down people, these people that have lived these kind of humdrum lives. I think it really speaks to uh I think Paul looks back a lot. I think he looks back into his Liverpudlian history and the past as much as this last song that Richard mentioned, as much as they were singing about looking to the future and revolution, all this stuff. I think Paul tends to look in on himself or look back upon himself and where he came from and his home and his history, and Liverpool as a place. And Eleanor Rigby was a real life person with a that I don't know if there's too much about her. Just reading a little quickly. This is terrible.
This is one of the songs. Well, while you're looking that up, that I think
Yeah.
George
Sorry.
Martin makes this song with the
Oh, sure.
arrangements, and I think also this is a place where the Kinks and the Beatles are sharing similar territory. A lot of times the Kinks are kind of writing little like kind of sarcastic little, um,
Like
you
character
know,
studies.
character studies, but sometimes about these nosy British people or whatever. But sometimes they're very loving and pastoral about the Waterloo Sunset. It's about a happy song about people, commuters through a city and people, going on their way. But I think this is a place where even the Stones would write, you know, uh, 19th Nervous Breakdown, or, the Stones would kind of write some of these little kind of scathing stories, or about the citizenry, the hypocrisy of the upper class. But yeah, this has so much pathos in it, and the Martin score really arrangements really bring it out too. What were you going to say, Michael?
Well, just my tiny insignificant amount of research. Apparently, there was a real life Eleanor Rigby, and apparently she was buried in church ground where Paul and John went to school. Although apparently Paul defends himself as if it was a totally made up name. But then I don't know if that carries much weight because the name Eleanor Rigby is very specific. And I think that what happens is, what's interesting about the Beatles, I think at times, is their constant retelling and reimagining of how something was created and how these stories came about. The 95 documentary anthology was so fascinating to see how these people are, and they're a lot more lively than they are today. I mean, literally
Yeah, more alive. Yeah.
by one. Where their memory of this stuff is like so vibrant, especially with Paul and everything. But their stories change over time. It's like this Stan Lee effect, where Stan Lee has created the Spider-Man and all of the Marvel universe, and like he gets so much accolades for all this stuff. But he was just like this dopey comic book writer that, he didn't really imagine like the comparisons of like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King with Magneto and Professor X. One was just like, he's the Magnet Man. And then, but over 60 years, people and other writers have just like added all this extra stuff to them as they want, because they're fictional characters. And I think that happens too with like Paul and John Lennon would be a very interesting person if he was alive. I mean, he was a very interesting person, and then he died. But I think what he would have been like for the last 40 years would have been just wild as a person. But how much revision, how much memory fades, how much things happen. Like the fact that he seemingly couldn't remember the name of this person that he probably saw on his gravestone, and then still feels the need to still kind of get into that. No, this is a creation of my own. Very strange.
Yeah.
That's all.
There's an interview with George Martin and Paul for the Abbey Road documentary, where they're talking about recording Live and Let Die and offering Live and Let Die to the producers, to Herbert Broccoli, or to the Bond producers. And then Robert Broccoli, whoever Broccoli was, Cubby, thank you so much. Cubby was saying, who are we going to get to sing it? And George Martin and Paul says, me. Me, I'm going to be the singer of the song. Paul McCartney is who's going to sing the song. And he had been suggesting Aretha Franklin or suggesting Carly Simon. And Paul was like, no, I sing the song. But the historians were saying there's no way Paul thought that was true, that he's just chosen to tell a good story, that he's chosen the version of history he wants, like all old people do. So I think they just pick whatever's the version.
Paul is known for being a fairly unreliable narrator of his own life.
And I don't see how you could even I mean, he's no Keith Richards, who knows when he did what cocaine and in what city. According to the book, he knows exactly where he did heroin in Marrakesh and all that stuff. Okay. All right. Richard, what's your final choice?
Last choice is the man known as Dr. Robert
Oh,
from the
cool.
song Dr. Robert. Once again off of Revolver, another John Lennon song. And this one is about, there's been a lot of speculation about who Dr. Robert is. Most Beatles historians, people who in the know, have sort of zeroed in on Dr. Robert Freeman, who
Mm.
was a sort of physician to the stars back in the 1960s. Like he was Elizabeth Taylor's doctor and Richard Burton and just this who's who, especially of New York celebrities back in the 60s. And he was known as sort of a Dr. Feelgood.
Ah.
Somebody, if you needed feeling a little worn down, well, here's a prescription for some amphetamines. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Feeling a little too amped up? Here's a prescription for some downers. You'll be fine. Just want to get high as a kite? Here's a prescription for that too. It's cool. So he was sort of known as somebody who loved to be known for being loved to be known for being associated with the famous, and
Mm.
had no problem with prescribing the rich and famous whatever they felt like they needed to get by in their daily lives. And that's the genesis of the song Dr. Robert. Now, why John decided to write this song, again, he's kind of in his Dylan phase. He's writing, he says a lot of it is kind of about himself, that he even says that, look, when we were on tour, I was the pill man. Later it was the roadies, but I was the one who was carrying the pills for everybody when we would go on tour. So I would kind of felt like I was sort of the pill guy. And you mentioned the Rolling Stones kind of as a counterpoint to the Beatles, and they're sort of what they're writing about is kind of playing off of each other. And the Stones had just come out not too long before this with Mother's Little Helper,
Mhm.
which is the song about, the upper class, upper middle class wives kind of using little pills to help them get through their day, and kind of the hypocrisy of that. So this may have been a response to that or kind of inspired by that. But, obviously he can't come out and say name names, but this is as close as he can come to doing that. It
Mhm.
was a little nod and a wink, so everyone who is in the know would know who he was talking about. And I just love the
Ah.
idea that there were millions of teen kids singing along to this song when they put the LP on their record player, probably with no thought process about what the song is actually about.
Mhm. Oh, it's fun. Wow, that's a cool insight. I'd never even asked myself. I don't think I've thought who that song was likely about a drug dealer or whatever. But it is kind of like an indictment of upper class persons who are doing nefarious things. Whereas it seems like there was a sport, especially with the Stones, but also with the Beatles. There was a sport uh, on behalf of the police of arresting rock stars. It was like the it was like the most important thing they could do was to arrest the Stones or arrest the Beatles or try to find those drugs if they could. So
Right.
yeah, this is
And
it's
if
an
they couldn't
indictment.
find him, they would just plant them.
Yeah, just put them in their bags. Okay, Michael, what is your last choice?
My last choice is a song from Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, but it's not Sergeant Pepper, as I really wanted to choose that, but I didn't. I chose um, Mr. Kite from For the Benefit
Oh,
of
fun.
Mr. Kite. Um, I think that the idea of the album for Sergeant Pepper was this big kind of uh calliope or this big like they're putting on a show. They're out there in their funky Beatles outfits, and they're putting on a show. And there's this kind of ringmaster element to it. Sergeant Pepper himself is this person that's leading the way, and John Lennon writes the song that is based entirely on this old circus poster from like the 1800s that he had found and purchased and saw. Um,
Mhm.
and everything just about that is mentioned in the song, Mr. Kite. Uh, it's it says on the poster, I'm looking at it, it says for the benefit of Mr. Kite with Mr. J. Henderson and all these different people that are doing this sort of thing with horses and trampolines and nonsense. And the song itself is this kind of uh, kind of carnival sounding calliope sort of like merry-go-round type music really fits in within the theme of like Sergeant Pepper as this kind of carnival sort of atmosphere. What I found so interesting is like if you didn't know what he's singing about, he would sound like this genius, like John Lennon. He would sound like, oh, he's just coming up with all these interesting characters. He's just looking at the page. He's sitting there and he's just like, okay, so I'm going to write this song. Okay, Mr. Kite, it's all there. Trampolines, I can figure out what's going to rhyme with all this stuff. I can write this sort of song. I am inspired by this thing that I see. I chose this specifically because I think that because the T-Rex or the Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3 just rang in. Sometimes I get the same feeling when like I listen to a Morrissey song. And there are some Morrissey songs that all the stuff that he has written about is cribbed from someplace else. And he sounds so intelligent and he sounds so well read. And you sound so wordly, but sometimes it's like, I got to think of the name of the song, but some of the songs are just like, oh, he's just singing about something that he read. He's just, he read this thing and now he's writing a song about it. And I guess that's the way to sound smart. That's the way that works. Yeah. And I think that this is one of those songs for me that feels like, oh, well, you're just very well. Oh, I thought that you had this wonderful imagination. It's like, no, you got a poster from a 5 and dime shop. And I think ultimately the magic of songwriting really gets broken down and dissipates once you start kind of learning the history of these things. It does two things. It adds like this tremendous value to it because like, oh, this world is so expansive. But then it's like, okay, I guess I could sing songs about looking at my shelf, the art of Star Wars as well. Guess what? Now I'm going to sing a song about it. Here's a song about Boba Fett and Grand Moff Tarkin. How about that? Aren't those wonderful characters that I just invented? But it's not like I'll say this. It's not like I think he ever claimed that he invented any of this stuff. But if you don't know the history and you don't know history behind it, it only leads to that sort of I don't know.
Yeah. I think it was In My Life was another Lennon song. I think that Paul had started off as, there are places I'll remember, that corner of Liverpool where you would get chips. It was one of those travel logs. And
I love that.
Paul,
what a great
Paul goes
song.
Paul goes to John and says, why don't you make this a real thing about your emotions and how you feel? And I know you are a troubled person full of a lot of feelings about abandonment from your mom and this and that. And then, John just goes, yeah, okay. And then pulls out one of the best rock songs that's ever been, one of the best ballads that's ever been. But yeah, I see what you mean. But with Sergeant Pepper, with Strawberry Field, it's really just kind of it's almost like MapQuest. Or they're just reading off, they're in the studio. And I think it's also like, oh shit, we need to finish this album. What do I put in here? All right, guys, this was a fun one. This was super fun. The Mount Rushmore of names or characters in Beatles songs, and without more.
Jeff, who would win in a fight? Richard's 4 choices versus my 4 choices. I mean,
well, I technically have 5 people, so, and one of yours is a kid.
That's true.
Another one's an old lady.
Sherman now has an army. Sherman, I imagine
Sir Walter Raleigh. He's probably got people.
Oh yeah.
We're not coming out of this, Mr. Kites. Well, try to find nowhere, man. I'll tell you that. Try to find that guy. Not gonna land a punch on him.
That's funny. Eleanor Rigby doesn't even have a face. She keeps it in a jar.
Sitting in a jar by her door. Yeah.
Who's it for? Okay, well, here's the choices. And I wonder if I don't know if I can turn off the things. I have my little buttons that I switch here. Okay. All right. Lists. Okay. What did I do it? Okay. Sorry, dudes. Let's see. All right. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. This will be just another 20 minutes while I figure this out. I'll cut this out of the edit. Damn it. That's not it. Okay. Okay, here's the top ones. We're going to go with Eleanor Rigby. We're going to go with Dr. Robert. We're going to deal with Mr. Wilson and Mr. Heath. And then we're also going to go with Melanie Coe.
Who?
Melanie Coe. She was a young woman who this is kind of happened in reverse. Yeah. Do you remember it?
I think I know this one.
Yeah. She was on the show. Paul first met her when she was 13 on the show Ready, Steady, Go.
Yeah.
Where she had been kind of a recurring cast member, and the Beatles appeared on the show, and Melanie participated in a lip sync contest. And they didn't lip sync to a Beatles song. They lip sync to Brenda Lee's song, Jump the Broomstick. And then Paul McCartney was the person that chose the winner and decided that Melanie did the best job. And when you say, but then later on, Melanie got knocked up and left town with her boyfriend, who was a croupier. And Paul saw this article in the paper and then wrote, "She's leaving home," about this girl, not knowing that he had met her 4 years ago at this TV show. So I just thought that was a wild
coincidence. It's a wild coincidence.
Yeah. And I realized she is not necessarily a name, but I just thought that was a funny, wild coincidence. So. All right. Thanks, gentlemen. This has been, thanks, audience, listeners. Right. As Richard said, please share, subscribe, tell everybody you know. This has been the Mount Rushmore of names or characters in Beatles songs. I'm always Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael. I could have been the Eggman.
Goo goo good shoe.